So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the topic of PCF. So I will be talking about what is a Power Apps component framework in general. I'm more used to show the actual coding of Power Apps component framework controls, but today I will try to keep it on the highest level as I possibly can and don't go too much into details of coding it. So let's start and see how we'll be done. Okay, first of all, who am I? So I'm a software developer based in Zagreb, Croatia. I'm Microsoft MVP for a year and so now. I'm working for biggest Microsoft consultancy in Croatia called Span, and I'm around in BizApp space for 5 years. You can contact me on various social media. So my first one and the most active one is LinkedIn, following by Twitter. And there is also my blog that you can read articles about some developing stuff around Dynamics or Power Apps. So let's first start. How did all begin in the past? So we didn't have any framework for front-end development. That part was missing in the Power Apps and Dynamic space for years, and there was only HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as web resources. We need to deploy every single part to orchestrate it and make it as one. And when we want to add some more logic, what would we do? Usually do, just we will just add one more JavaScript file and one more and one more, and we will just adding JavaScript all around, and it was a big mess after a really short period of time. So we had to work around about that, and how Microsoft told us to do it by creating controls via new framework provided by Microsoft. So that's Power Apps Component Framework. And what is Power Apps Component Framework? It's basically a framework that allows us to build rich UI controls that will significantly improve user experience of our applications. If you're familiar with Dynamics in the past, we had only basic controls for our fields, for example, a simple text box, or I don't know, maybe a text box for number elements and stuff like that. And it's not that appealing to the end users because we couldn't express ourselves via that controls. And we want to make something different, make it more shiny, like on the picture on the right. And this is where the PCF steps in. It's a pro developer tool. You can do some basic PCF stuff if you're a citizen developer, but for complex stuff and more usual stuff, you really need to be a pro developer to develop such controls. Of course, imagination is the only limit here, because if you have a great idea, you just need someone to implement it. That's your pro developer most of the time. But if you have a simple idea that you want to implement and it's simple enough, give it a try. Try it by yourself. You will maybe know how it's working in the background, and you will learn much more about the PCF component framework in general if you try to build a pretty simple component. Some people, citizen devs, created a few controls and they're awesome. So you can try to. But in general, modern web technologies are used in PCF development. The first of all, it's TypeScript. All the developers around, they are here for some period of time. They're used to backend development on Dynamics using C# and .NET, and the TypeScript is C-sharp-like language that is based on JavaScript that will make you do the code just as you are used to do it with C-sharp. It's pretty much the same. Of course, there are some limitations with TypeScript because it's front-end stuff, but you can easily convert your C-sharp code to TypeScript with uh, a, a little bit of coding. You can use also React and Fabric UI. React is the framework that will make you code complex controls more easier because it's a modern framework that will provide you some useful API calls and make your life easier. And Office Fabric UI, now known as Fluent UI, it's rebranded by Microsoft, allows you to use the same controls like Microsoft is using now for their first-party controls. For example, you just use Office Fabric UI text box control, and it will almost look like the text box used in Power Apps. That's a really cool thing. You don't need to style your controls that way. You just use the Office Fabric one, and boom, you just tweak it with a few more lines of CSS and you are good to go. You have the same user experience as in Power Apps. How cool is that? First of all, there are two types of controls that you can make at a moment. There will be more of the controls in future, but the first one is field control. That is basically a mask over a single field. For example, you have a text field and you want to make it, I don't know, you want to change the color of the text to red because you don't like the usual black color on that text box. So you would make a mask over that control and make your text red. Of course, that's a ridiculous example, but basically that's the most efficient way because it's just a mask over your field. It's basically the out of the box control in the backend, but you just put a mask on that control and style it the other way. Think of it like it's a function. You need to have an input and it will give you some outputs. There's also bound type of property that will have one variable that will be an input and output at the same time. You need to map all your inputs and outputs at the beginnings because every function needs inputs to produce output. You need to provide everything to your function to get an output. There are lots of hacks around how people are trying to get that inputs, but basically framework allows you to use it the most simple way. You just add as much properties as you want, bind it to multiple fields, and there is your input. You just don't need to hack around the framework to get those inputs. At the moment, it supports most field types out there in Power Apps. For example, strings, numbers, date fields, but the complex ones like multiple option sets or lookups are still not supported. In last version, they already supported a file field that is newly added, I don't know, 2 months ago or so, and it's already supported in PCF. Let's see a few examples and how can it be used on a field control. So field controls, here's the example of control that provides you a list of countries followed by images, and you just need to type few letters. It will shrink the list, filter the list, and you have the text field that will always be the same. For example, if you go United Kingdom, it will always stay in the same format. If you search, for example, for Croatia, it will always be Croatia, and you can't input, I don't know, Crow as country. You can only pick the values from the list, and that's cool because you have a flags and it's much better UX experience than a simple text field. The second one is two option field. So you have true false options with the two value fields, but you can put some images. In this example, it is using Office Fabric UI and the icons provided by the framework, the Office UI framework, and you can just simply type the name of the icon and it will be used with your two option set. And you can see how you can use it easily. And the third one is, for example, if you need some field that has suffix or prefix, you can add, for example, centimeters of at the end of the number field, and you can of course define that suffix in the configuration of the control. For example, I want to measure weight and I will put pounds or kilograms at the end of my text box. So it's much better than putting that centimeter sign in brackets in the label, because people will always look at it better when it's in the field itself. Okay, so those are three examples of field control, but you can find tons of others all around the web. Okay, and the second one that is now available is dataset control. That is a mask over grid elements, so subgrids in the model-driven apps or over the collections in Canvas apps. So you can use it both in Canvas and model-driven apps. It supports all kinds of grids. The limit here is the same as in the field control. All the fields that are supported in field controls are also supported here as grid column elements. So we can't use, we can bind our control to lookup column because it's not supported. Basically, it's more complex control than field one, because it has more API calls that needs to be handled, more events that you need to be aware of. And in general, if you're starting, I would not recommend to start with a dataset control, but you should start with a field control, that's for sure, because you will be lost if you start developing a dataset control straight away. It's almost impossible to debug the PCF control in the testing harness provided by the framework. There is a testing harness that you can debug your component when you're developing it without deploying it to the environment. But in this case, you can't mock the data just the way that you want. You can upload all kinds of CSV files to mock the data, but if you need to call some API calls or pull the real data in your data set, it's not possible in the debug harness. You need to deploy it actually to the environment and debug it there, because otherwise your control will not behave as you expected before you test it on the real environment. Now let's check some examples of the dataset controls. The first one is the map control. Here you see the accounts dataset that is shown on the map. So basically here we have an address that is using Google Maps or Bing, I'm not sure here. Oh, Google, it says Google. It's Google API to convert addresses to the actual longitude and latitude and show it on the map. And when you click on the pin, it will show the pop-up of your account. When you click on the link, it will just open the account. And that's a really cool stuff to show, I don't know, locations of your offices or accounts, contacts on the map. It's more friendlier than just a list of accounts. And of course, when you search accounts, it will filter the list and zoom the map to the point that you show all the pins around that are returned as a result. The second one is documents viewer. It's used with a SharePoint attachments. Basically, when you are uploading SharePoint documents on Power Apps, when you have that integration on, you don't see the preview of the document. In this way, you can actually see the preview of the document, which is really cool when you have lots of documents, maybe versions that you see the different versions by the front page. The difference is on the front page, and you will easily see it here when you implement that control and add it to your form. The final one is also a cool one, and it's a diagram that shows events on the time frame scale. So for example, you see the make sure you have requested items as the first event that is spanned through a few days, and this loading bars below shows the percentage of completeness, I think, but you can see on the timeline how your events are aligned and display them in a much more better way for your users. Okay, that they're just some components that you can use, but of course we will talk later about more complex ones. But if you want to code your components by yourself, what do we need? Of course, there are a subset of tools provided as requirements by Microsoft that you need. It's Node.js plus npm. That's the basic tool set for the modern web development. So every model web developer has those two tools in his tool set, but those are only the beginning. You need to have .NET Framework version 4.6.2 that's used by backend development on Power Apps at the moment. So if you're transitioning from the backend development to front-end development on the PCF, you are already covered. But you don't need IDE to edit your code. The supported IDEs are Visual Studio 2017 Plus and Visual Studio Code, but I would really encourage you to use Visual Studio Code because it's the editor for the modern web development that has everything you need inside the editor. You can edit a code, you can open the terminal, type the terminal commands, you can have dozens of add-ons installed that will help you develop your controls. And it's a really cool and lightweight editor to have. Almost all consultants in my team use Visual Studio Code for the simple JavaScript adjustments. And I encourage you highly to use Visual Studio Code rather than the big brother Visual Studio Full Edition. But those are the tools that you really need to start developing. But the things are much easier with the tools created by the community. So let's jump to the community tools. First of all, there is a PCF Builder. I think almost all of you are familiar with XRM Toolbox. XRM Toolbox is a set of tools that you use with your environments, and it will help you with various things. In this example, Danish developed a tool that will visually provide you all the commands that you need to develop control. For example, you can initialize the PCF component, you can build it, you can initiate the test harness by just one click of a button. You can create a solution straight away with few clicks, and it's a really visual tool for beginners. If you're starting, I highly encourage you to use this tool because it will make your life so much easier than typing all that commands in command line and it's you can easily forget few things about a command and you will be stuck. And that's the hardest part for the beginners because then you're more likely to quit. But never quit, just use PCF Builder. The second one is also by the niche. It's PCF Builder, but now a Visual Studio Code extension. So almost everything that you can do in PCF Builder for XRM Toolbox, you can do in PCF Builder for Visual Studio Code. You can see on the GIF, it will just prompt, you need to select a command that you want to run. You just pick the values that are popping, the inputs that are popping out and asking you to type in something, and you're ready to go. It will initialize the project for you. As you could see on the right, we typed test namespace, test control, and type field, and the repository is created for us. You don't need to know the syntax because PCF Builder extension will prompt everything needed for the commands in the background. So it's easy. Of course, forget a syntax, just go with the flow, just input the parameters asked by the PCF extension, and you're good to go. And the final one, also included from the last version in the PCF Builder for Visual Studio Code, is my tool called PCF Generator. That's basically a Yeoman generator. So Yeoman is the templating engine. It will help you to scaffold the project, the initial project for you. You need to execute, I don't know, 5 or 6 commands in total to initialize your project fully. But with this PCF generator, it's a command line tool. You just, as you can see on the right, input all the data on the prompts, and it will initialize project for you. And for example, in the Microsoft version of scaffolding, you will not be provided with CSS, sample CSS classes, which is pretty important because people are not doing the CSS classes as it should be done, because they're not prefixing it with your namespaces. This tool does that for you. It initializes translation regex files to add a translation straight away from the start. Also the preview images, like tips in the code that you need to change something here, and you are good to go. And when you are when the PCF generator finishes with the process, your control is ready to be deployed to the environment. When you try to install the solution on your environment, it will be a working solution straight away from the very first steps of your PCF development. So don't spend time on scaffolding your project. Just initiate the PCF generator command, initialize your solution, and you're ready to go. You will then only code the interesting stuff. You don't need to worry about scaffolding the projects and knowing all the syntax around the PCF command line tool. And if you are still not able to code the components, there is a pretty good community resource called PCF Gallery. PCF Gallery is collection of PCF controls made by the community. Is developed by Guido, and he's taking his duty to update all the controls that are found around Twitter. He probably adds your PCF control in less than a day to the PCF Gallery if you post it on social media, for example, LinkedIn or Twitter. At the moment, I think there are more than 200 controls available on the PCF Gallery, around 100 authors out there. But the important thing is there is idea section there. If you can't make the PCF control by yourself, you just post the idea there and community will take care of it. That's really great because there are more than few ideas by the community that are citizen developers that they can't develop controls by themselves, but people from the community created PCF controls for them and they're happily using them after. Okay, so now let's go to the demo part and I will show you how to use and configure the control and show a few examples on my instance and how it's working on the real example. Okay, let's go switch the window. Are we here? Yeah, great. So let's go to my app. If you're following me around social media, you know that all my controls are mostly Pokemon themed, so I made a Pokédex app. So let's look at the first control that we have here. So there is a grid, so it's a dataset control that loads the images of the records shown in the URLs here as the list of images and names here. Okay, let's go and show it here. So we have Pokemons represented by the URLs shown in the records, and you can just go through the images like you would do on the any other grid. You can then click on the record and open the record. So it is really cool feature that you represent all your records as images. I used it on a few projects that we saved URLs by some integrations and use it as the images on the dataset part. So now we entered the one Pokemon. I really don't know there's Pokemon that's really new stuff for me. I'm more used to the first or second generations, but okay. So we have an image here that's field level control showing the exact same URL shown on the data set. And it's used only on the image and it's bound on the single line of text. You put it as a mask on a single line of text and it will be displayed here. And my favorite control, I think that's my top control ever. And it was developed in early stages of the PCF. It's made by Tanguy Zard, the author of XRM Toolbox, and it's basically many-to-many relationship checkbox handler. So those records here are records stored in the Pokemon types. Okay, when we click the Pokemon types, we have the records. They're just simple records represented by the name and nothing else here. Okay, so we have all the types of Pokemons. And when we go here, let's go on a more familiar one. Okay, so here you can see all the Pokemon types stored here as the checkbox grid. And it's a many-to-many relationship with the Pokemon. So Pokemon and Pokemon types are many-to-many relationship. Okay. And when we click here, for example, we want to make this Pokemon a dragon type and the grass type. Okay, and in the background, the actual relationship between those two records is created. If we go to the more convenient style of showing those kind of data, we go to the related subgrid and we can see that dragon and grass type are attached to our Pokemon. We can easily just remove that dragon by a single click on a checkbox, and if we go here, we can see that the relationship is gone between the dragon type and Pokemon, and it's really cool. I think that that's the most used PCF control out there. It has a lot of possibilities. You can choose to present the checkboxes as a flip switch. You can change the color. You can take the colors of the text or the checkboxes directly from your records. For example, if I go to dark record and I define some hex code, I can easily apply that hex code to the checkbox or the text of the dark type here. Okay, and I was talking also about the prefix and suffix controls. And if we go here, we can see that we have a height and weight. So height is represented in centimeters and weight in kilograms. And if I type something really big, you can see that the suffix is always at the end of the record. If we just delete everything, the suffix is deleted. Okay, I will type something here and boom, we have again a suffix. Really great way to improve your UX that way. And now, okay, the last thing I want to show in the demo is how to configure control by yourself. So here we have a power that's, I don't know, some imaginary field that will show the power of the Pokemon on scale from 1 to 5. So Bulbasaur is power 2, and we want to show that power the other way. So let's go to the PCF Gallery and find something. I found one control called rating PCF. So if I search for rating, I found a rating PCF control. Here's the preview of the control, maybe a GIF, someone who made it. But the most important part here is download button. And for most citizen developers out there, the GitHub is the biggest problem. I'm now on GitHub, and how can I download the PCF control here? I'm totally confused where to go. My UI is the new one. If you search for releases part, it will. If you have an old UI, it will be shown somewhere here. But on the new UI, it's shown here. So we click on releases and search for releases. And we can see there is only one release made by David. And most of the controls have unmanaged and managed controls. Why is that so? Because, for example, when I'm testing, I like to do managed because I want to get rid of it really fast. But if you want to do ALM stuff around your PCF components, you really want to download the unmanaged version, because that way you can add the component made by someone else to your solution and include it to your ALM pipelines that way. But in this scenario, I will download this managed zip file. Okay, just click on the managed zip file. It will be downloaded on your PC. And basically, what is that? You downloaded a solution. And if you're familiar with solutions, you go to makepowerapps.com, just go import, search for your solution here, go next, import it, and because it's managed, it will be just installed. We don't need to publish our changes to be shown, and that we will be able to use the control. Okay, now the import is finishing. Come on, make it a little bit faster. No, he's thinking too much.
What do you expect?
So this control is not that big, so I don't know what's happening here. Come on. Oh, it's imported successfully. So we want to add our control to the form, but the point here is we can do it by the new maker experience. We need to go back and use the old classic UI to add our controls to the form. Okay, just go to your solution, go switch to classic. And when the classic is opened, we can start configuring our controls. Okay, let's go here. So we want to edit Pokemon form. We go to forms, the main form, open the form, and we want to mask the power field. Double click on the field and go to the controls tab on the field properties. Go to the add control and search for your control. As you can see, most of the controls are represented by images, so you can easily pick the right control. Here is the rating control that we downloaded, and we just click add, and the first thing you need to do is enable it on web, because most of the people don't enable it on any interface. They just use the default control on, so they leave the dots here, and then they say, oh, my control is not showing anywhere. Where's the problem? The problem is here. You need to enable it for the each UI you want to use it on. And so the first property is bound. So we added it on the power field, presented as fake power. But all those four here properties are the properties that you can add to your control and edit them on fly. You can bind it to some field on the form, or you can just input some values here. For example, here I can make it 6. Okay, so it will show 6 stars. And you can choose the icon from the Fabric UI. You just go to the Fabric UI page and find the name of the icon. We'll just leave it as default for now. So we have a field star and on-field star. And we want to make it the other color. So I don't know which color is this, but you can input hex here, or I think you can type the name of the most basic colors. Okay, I hope that is working. I never tried it with a name, but let's do it. Okay, when you're finished, you just need to save and publish your form. And when publishing is completed, you just go and refresh your form. Of course, here, maybe you need to hard reload your form to pick the latest control. So Control F5, and when I press Control F5, I should see the new star control on my form. Here we go. So we've edited the number of stars in the configuration, and you can easily change the number of stars just by changing the value of number of stars in your form. And when you change the value, save the form, refresh it. When you open the form in the backend, oh, well, it's interesting. The control disappeared. I don't know why, but let's just Control F5. What's happening here? But okay, I put it as a 5 stars here, and on every load, it's shown as 5 stars. But in backend, if you go advanced find, search for the entity record itself, and go to power column, it will show 5 as a whole number in background, but it will always be shown as stars on your forms. And I hope it's everything I had for today. So I hope it was easy enough to understand for non-developer guys out there, because as I said at the beginning, I'm used to coding that stuff live on most of my presentations. So I hope you picked some stuff from this presentation, and let's jump to the question part.